Friday on TGIF, it's a house full of Urkels. In Carl's nightmare about the future,
Laura married Steve Urkel?
all new Family Matters.
Eat him up.
Then, the wildest things happen when the kids are left home alone.
Just won $680.
Let it ride.
All new Boy Meets World on TGIF Friday.
When this
Man.
boy meets world,
Man.
meets world, wandering down this road we call life.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Man Meets World podcast. I am the man that is meeting the world. My name is Brandon, and I am so excited to be doing this new show as part of the Fans Not Experts podcast family. Before we begin dissecting the brilliance of Boy Meets World, let me first start off by telling you a bit about myself, what this podcast is, and how it came to be. Let me begin with a confession. I am a 31-year-old man who has DVD box sets of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, Saved by the Bell, and even Saved by the Bell the college years. I am in constant search of where I can legally watch California Dreams. I have the entire Power Rangers series saved in my Netflix queue. Anytime Family Matters, Step by Step, Smart Guy, or Full House is on TV and reruns, I have to stop what I am doing and watch it. And yes, I also love Fuller House. While I still love the shows I watched as a child, as an adult, I watched some of the biggest, most critically acclaimed shows. I would put The Wire, Breaking Bad, and The Walking Dead on my list as some of my all-time favorite TV programs. But there is one show, as both a child and now as an adult, that I love more than all others. Boy Meets World. This is a program I grew up with. The childhoods of Corey Matthews, Sean Hunter, and Topanga Lawrence ran almost parallel with my own childhood in terms of age and even some experiences. I loved the characters, the realism of how family situations were portrayed. For example, the parents actually getting mad and giving consequences. Not everything ended with a nice little bow on top. I also loved the portrayal of the social experiences the characters went through because it was relatable to me. From their days in 6th grade and feeling out of place, to their days in high school and dealing with topics like alcohol and relationships. But more than anything else, I love how the show never took itself seriously, even in a serious episode. It would always poke fun at itself, and was one of the first shows, at least in terms of family sitcoms, that was very meta. Where do you think Fuller House got it from? So all this brings me to this podcast. My cousin, who started fansnotexperts.com, texted me the other day about doing a Boy Meets World podcast, and I knew right away it was something I wanted to do. So now as a 31-year-old married man who works full-time and goes to graduate school full-time, I have decided what my life needs is an excuse to rewatch the entire series of Boy Meets World in chronological order, and then immediately record my thoughts, opinions, and analysis of each episode for your listening pleasure, or torture, depending on how much you love Boy Meets World. So again, I welcome you to episode 1, and on this episode, we start at the very beginning with the pilot. This episode originally aired on September 24th, 1993. It debuted with 16.5 million viewers, at least according to Wikipedia, which is never wrong. It was the 5th highest rated broadcast of the night.
Good morning, Mr. Feeny.
Good morning, Mr. Matthews. A candy bar? Doesn't your mother feed you a proper breakfast?
Oh, yeah, she does. And I gotta get the taste of this shredded wheat out of my mouth.
You know, you're not doing your body any favors loading up on junk like that.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Feeny. And please enjoy that high-vitamin astronaut drink you're sucking down.
There's no gravity in space, Mr. Matthews. Therefore, astronauts suck up. Learn from them.
The pilot episode starts in the school cafeteria. The first person we see is none other than our main character, Corey Matthews. And he is immediately followed by the on-screen introduction of Mr. Feeny. The first line of the entire show is "Good morning, Mr. Feeny." The second line is "Good morning, Mr. Matthews." And with those lines being said, we officially enter the Boy Meets World universe. Hey, everything needs to be universe now, right? So I'm going to call this the Boy Meets World universe. We're then introduced after a back and forth conversation with Feeny and Corey. We are introduced to two of his friends. One of his friends is the infamous Sean Hunter, his BFF, and then another random friend. So this reminded me that in these early episodes, sometimes it was Corey and Sean, sometimes it was Corey, Sean, and a random third person. The character's name for this random third person was Nicholas. He looked super familiar to me, so I had to look him up on imdb.com. His name is Chauncey Leopardi, and I realized when I looked at his IMDb page what I remembered him from. He played the character Squints in The Sandlot, one of the greatest movies of all time. But anyways, I digress. Back to the scene. So we are still in the school cafeteria. Corey, Sean, and Nicholas are sitting at the table, and the three of them start bragging about how late they stayed up. Now, in their 6th grade minds, the barometer for how late they stayed up is how far they made it into a late night talk show. And they go around the table, and they try to outdo each other. So Corey starts off, monologue. Nicholas goes, monologue, bad sketch. Sean goes, monologue, bad sketch, first guess. And they keep going. Long story short, Sean Hunter, because he is a badass and he does what he wants and he stays up as late as he wants, he won. He stayed up the latest. So after that scene in the school cafeteria, we transition into Mr. Feeny's classroom. Mr. Feeny is teaching a lesson about Romeo and Juliet. He is trying to teach his students about the power of love, about the magic of love, about the mystery of love. But young 6th grade Corey Matthews could care less because the Philadelphia Phillies are playing for a chance to be in the playoffs. So he is listening to the Phillies game during Mr. Feeny's class, and of course, he gets busted. And when he gets busted by Mr. Feeny, Corey goes, "Who cares about some guy who killed himself over some dumb girl?" My thoughts exactly, Corey Matthews. My thoughts exactly. So, Corey Matthews is given detention for listening to the Phillies game. Then we transition to the Matthews house. And we are shown the bedroom where Corey stays, and also where his older brother stays, Mr. Eric Matthews. And Eric is on the phone. He is super excited. We find out why he's so excited, because he got a date with a 10th grader. A hot little Betty 10th grader. So it's important to note that Eric, during season 1, is a somewhat one-dimensional character. They really flesh him out over the course of the 7 seasons to the point where he becomes a complete opposite person than who he is when the show starts. But at the very beginning of Boy Meets World, Eric is a pretty typical high school boy. He's supposed to be the good-looking older brother, the cool older brother, and all he cares about is the ladies. So he is super excited about getting a date with this 10th grader. Corey then enters the room, and he is also super excited because the Phillies won, and if they win the next game, they are officially in the playoffs. And of course, Eric Matthews has tickets to that next Phillies game. And of course, Eric Matthews has only 2 tickets, and of course, Eric Matthews is bringing the person most dear to his heart, the girl, the 10th grade girl, because Eric cares about the ladies and he wants to get laid. So of course he's bringing the girl. Corey is furious. He thought he was going to the game. He thought he was a shoo-in. He's a huge Phillies fan, obviously. He is furious. So he goes downstairs to complain to his parents. Mom, Mrs. Matthews, knew that Eric was going to ask the girl and is super excited and happy for Eric, hearing that she said yes. So now Corey is feeling really rejected. He's feeling really bad about himself. In the scene, we're also introduced to Dad, Mr. Matthews. We're introduced to Corey's little sister, Morgan. And Morgan is the only one in the family right now trying to welcome Corey into her heart, trying to make Corey feel good about himself. But Corey is a 6th grader. He wants nothing to do with girls. Girls are ewy. And if he did want to have something to do with girls, he certainly does not want anything to do with his baby sister. So we then go back to the school, and again we're in the school cafeteria, and again Corey, Nicholas, and Sean are all talking. And Corey declares himself an orphan. He feels so rejected from his family, he calls himself an orphan. The boys then notice in a back table Mr. Feeny chatting it up, trying to woo a new female teacher. I say that because that is going to be important coming up. So Corey declares himself an orphan, and in the next scene we find out he feels so rejected from his family that he has decided he's going to move out and live in the treehouse. Of course, he is a man of luxury, so Mrs. Matthews still brings him a brown bag for dinner. Morgan goes out to visit him, offers her teddy bear in case he gets scared during the night, but like I said before, Corey is a big 6th grader. He wants nothing to do with a little baby girl sister thing, so he shoos Morgan away. But then something interesting happens. Turns out Mr. Feeny, by the way, I should have said this before. This was established in the scene earlier where we're first introduced to Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, but it was established that Mr. Feeny is the next door neighbor. Now, let me talk about this for a minute. I said in the beginning, when I was giving my spiel about all the reasons why I love Boy Meets World, the thing I love most about it is how the show pokes fun at itself. It is very meta, I said. Well, Mr. Feeny always being there with them would become a running joke in the show. As we go through each episode and go through the seasons, Mr. Feeny starts as their teacher, then becomes their principal, then becomes their principal and teacher, then becomes their professor in college and their dean, and it becomes a running joke. They make fun of it. They have fun with it. But this is our sort of first introduction to the different ways Mr. Feeny is going to play a role in their life. Not only is he their teacher, but he's also their next door neighbor. Now back to the scene with the treehouse. The treehouse has a perfect view into Mr. Feeny. Sorry. Every time I say Feeny, I want to do that. I'm going to try to stop myself. No guarantees I'll be able to do so. But the treehouse is a perfect view into Mr. Feeny's dining room. And Corey begins to spy like a little perv. But he sees Feeny, thankfully not doing anything too risque. He's setting a table. It looks like it's going to be a nice dinner for 2. Then Corey sees the phone ring. Feeny answers it. Feeny hangs up. Feeny clears a space. then sits down and has dinner by himself. Sad music is playing. Corey is shown in the treehouse, sad look on his face, munching a delicious chicken leg that Mrs. Matthews brought him in a brown bag. And he stares down, spying upon sad Mr. Feeny. It was a very, very sad, emotional scene. So after that sad, emotional scene, Corey sneaks back into his house as if he really needs to sneak. But he sneaks back into the house so nobody notices. He goes into his bedroom and he starts going through his dresser. The boy needs some clean underwear. He needs to look good and smell good for school. Then we have what I'm going to call real talk number 1. His mother's in the bedroom, and the two of them have a heart-to-heart. Corey opens up and tells his mother how he feels rejected by Eric. He cannot believe that he is interested in girls and left him for a girl. And his mother goes, "You did the same thing to your father. You used to throw the football with him, and then you got friends." Corey at first feels he gets defensive. You make me sound like I'm a bad guy. And Mom goes, no. It's all part of growing up. That is real talk number 1. Real talk number 2 happens in the next scene. Corey's sitting in detention. And he keeps talking. Feeny keeps ignoring him. Corey tries to get his attention by dancing. It looks like he's having a seizure. Feeny still ignores him. Corey goes, "I'm walking away. I'm opening the door." And Feeny still ignores him. This drives Corey crazy. Apparently, ignoring him was exactly the right teacher move to do, because Corey sits down, stays in detention. Then Corey goes into about how he feels about love. Love is no good. And he opens up and admits to Feeny that he saw him having a dinner for one, just like he did in his treehouse, and he must feel the same exact way he does. Finally, Feeny stops ignoring him, and Feeny gives him a classic Feeny life lesson. He calls love the greatest wonder of the world, and he says he feels bad that already in 6th grade he has made up his mind about a topic that philosophers have dedicated their lives to trying to figure out. And Feeny goes, "We are next door neighbors, and once in a while, I cannot help but look in your direction." And delivers a classic Feeny line. Real strength comes from being a family. He talks about how a family begins with the love of a man and a woman and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Feeny really goes in on this whole love thing, which leaves Corey, he's sort of stunned. Little scared, not sure what to say. So, this conversation with Mr. Feeny convinces Corey Matthews to move back into the real house, out of the treehouse, and then we have real talk number 3. Corey apologizes to his dad, Mr. Matthews, about leaving him for his friends, and Dad looks a little surprised, is completely not concerned about it. He understands it's part of growing up. He's happy that he has friends. And then we transition to real talk number 4. So we had real talk number 1 with Mom, real talk number 2 with Feeny, real talk number 3 with Dad, and now real talk number 4. We're back in the Matthews brothers' bedroom. Corey is loving life, playing duck hunts. He's aiming the gun at everything, saying die, die, die. He's killing everything because he is a mass murderer in training. He is a serial killer in training. I seriously thought that was what Girl Meets World was going to be about, by the way. Turns out he is a New York City public school teacher, not a serial killer. But anyways, again, I digress. So Eric comes into the room. Corey is thrilled. Phillies won 5-3. They're in the playoffs. But Eric looks very glum. Eric said he had a lot of fun, but he was a bad date. He was awkward. He was nervous. He was clumsy, falling over himself, stumbling his words, kind of like I have been doing this whole podcast. So then, Corey being a man of wisdom. Now, for those of you who have watched Boy Meets World, and I'm assuming you have seen, if you're listening to this podcast, you know that Corey Matthews matures into being an old soul. He's a young person with an old soul. And this is sort of our first hint at that because he has such a wisdom to his older brother. He says, call her so you stop feeling sad. Ask her to take her to a movie. That way you're in a situation where you do not have to talk. You do not have to do anything. You just need to sit there and watch the movie. And he goes, I miss my cool older brother. This is another very emotional scene. And also marks the end of Real Talk number 4, which is perfect timing because Corey needs to move on to Real Talk number 5. So Corey goes downstairs. His little sister Morgan, who's had no time for this entire episode, is having a tea party. She asks Corey to... Actually, she does not ask Corey. She's given up on him. And Corey is surprised by this. He goes, you're not going to ask me to sit down and have a tea party? Of course, as soon as he says that, he's welcome to sit down, and they have a tea party. Mrs. Matthews comes, Mom comes, tries to break up the fun, goes, hey, Morgan, get upstairs, go to bed. And Corey goes, can we just finish our tea first? And he has a Real Talk number 5 saying to Morgan, he will always love her, always be there for her, always be her big brother. No matter what happens, no matter what changes happen, he's always going to be her big brother. And they get to stay up, they get to have their tea party, and he volunteers to put Morgan to bed. And when Mrs. Matthews asks Corey why he's volunteering his services, he says a line that sums up Boy Meets World perfectly. He goes, because I don't understand anything about my entire life. So then we go on to the final scene, and again, we're back in the school cafeteria. Apparently, the school only has 2 rooms, Mr. Feeney's classroom and the cafeteria. And again, Corey, Sean, and Nicholas, the random third friend, are there talking. And again, they see Mr. Feeny trying to woo this female teacher. Now, Corey thinks that she stood him up, which is why this ending scene is very important. Mr. Feeny makes a move. He asks her to dinner, tells her he will cook, and goes, in fact, I made a very nice dinner for my sister the other night, but she had to cancel. Corey looks stunned. He looks confused, to the point where Feeny goes, confused, Mr. Matthews? And he goes, yes, I am, sir. And Feeny goes, as it should be. And then the pilot episode of Boy Meets World concludes. So, this was an interesting episode. We were missing a lot of main characters. At the same time, we were introduced to a lot of main characters. Sean Hunter was barely in this episode. The 3 small scenes in the school cafeteria are the only time Sean appears. A very well-known Season 1 character, Stuart Minkus, although in the opening credits, actually does not appear in the pilot at all. And another even bigger character, Topanga Lawrence, was not even a thought in the writer's mind at this time. She's not in the opening credits. She's not in the episode. She would come in a few episodes down the road. So I'm looking forward to continuing Season 1, seeing Minkus for the first time, seeing Topanga for the first time. I'm interested in seeing how they portray the Corey-Sean friendship and how that evolves. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to the other seasons, because I think this is the rare show where it got better each season. It got better in the later years when they were in high school, and then it got even better when they went to college. So I'm glad that you listened. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for downloading. Help spread the word about the Man Meets World podcast. I would give this pilot episode 4 out of 5 Feenies. Only a 4 because while I thought they did a good job of establishing the main characters, I missed my Minkus, I missed my Topanga, and I even missed my Sean because he was barely in it. So I give it 4 out of 5 Feenies. And follow me on Twitter at MMWPod. Follow, I guess I'll call them the parent company, at Fans Not Experts. I do another podcast. If you're a fan of professional wrestling, I co-host with my cousin. Follow him at WrestleWatcher or at Mikey_C. Follow the podcast at WrestleFania Pod. I just gave you a lot of Twitter accounts to follow. But at the very least, follow this one at MMWPod, at MMWPOD. Thanks for listening, everybody. Class dismissed.
Fans Not Experts.